Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Since the Israel-Hamas war started in October last year, American troops stationed in Iraq and Syria have been attacked about 150 times by Iran-aligned militants. Now, the attacks against the Americans are seen as retaliation for America's support of Israel for its war on Gaza. On the 20th of January, at least about a dozen missiles were fired at a military base used by the US-led coalition forces in western Iraq. Now, the attack was attributed to Kataib Hezbollah. In retaliation, the United States carried out strikes in Iraq against 3 facilities linked to Kataib Hezbollah on the 23rd of January. In what could be perceived as a victory for the Iran-backed militia, both the Iraqi and the American government announced on the 25th of January that they'll begin talks soon to wind down the mission of a US-led military coalition that was formed originally to fight the so-called Islamic State in Iraq. Now, exacerbating the situation are Yemen's Houthis, who in continuation of their attacks claimed on the 26th of January that their naval forces had launched a missile attack on the British oil tanker Martin Luanda, setting the vessel on fire. The question is this: is the United States at this moment at risk of being drawn into a wider conflict in Iraq and other parts of West Asia, given its stated support of the Israeli bombardment of Gaza?
The United States has had a continuous presence in Iraq since its 2003 invasion. Though in 2011, all US combat forces had left, thousands of troops returned in 2014 in order to help the Iraqi government defeat the Islamic State. An estimated 2,500 US troops are deployed in Iraq today, in addition to some 900 in Syria. Since the Israel-Hamas war broke out on October 7th last year, American military installations have been struck more than 60 times in Iraq and over 90 times in Syria by Iran-backed militants. A mix of drones, rockets, mortars and ballistic missiles have been used for these attacks in retaliation to United States support of Israel in its war against Iran-backed Palestinian militant group Hamas. On the 20th of January, in the most serious attack this year, Kataib Hezbollah fired multiple ballistic missiles at Ain al-Assad air base in western Iraq. 4 US personnel suffered injuries and a member of Iraq's security forces was seriously injured in this attack launched from inside Iraq. Al-Assad is a large air base in Iraq's western desert where US troops have trained Iraqi security forces and now coordinate operations to counter the threat posed by the Islamic State. In a retaliatory strike 4 days later, the US CENTCOM forces conducted airstrikes against 3 facilities used by Kataib Hezbollah and other Iran-affiliated groups in Iraq. These strikes targeted Kataib Hezbollah headquarters, storage and training locations for rocket, missile and one-way attack UAV capabilities. The US retaliatory attack killed a Kataib Hezbollah fighter, triggering calls for US forces to leave. A couple of days later, the 2 governments announced plans to begin talks to wind down the mission of a US-led military coalition in Iraq. The US says the talks were first discussed last year and the timing is not related to the attacks.
I think the HMC meeting is not a negotiation about the withdrawal of US forces in Iraq. It is about what the future looks like for the US and Iraqi bilateral relationship. So part of the factors that we're taking into consideration, the ISF's capabilities, the operational environment, and then of course the threat of ISIS, those are all going to be part of these conversations on exactly what our footprint looks like within Iraq, and that's what this working group is for. There's no timeline set, and again, these meetings are not about a negotiation or a withdrawal from Iraq.
Though the United States denies it, the timing is suspect, since the Iraqi officials have periodically called for a withdrawal of coalition forces for years, especially after the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and Iraqi militia leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. in a US airstrike in January 2020 outside the Baghdad airport. Compounding matters for the US is the belligerence of the Iran-backed Houthis, who have targeted Israeli-owned, flagged or operated ships or ships heading to the Israeli ports since November last year. In response, the US and UK have carried out multiple rounds of airstrikes on the Houthi targets in Yemen, but the Houthis have remained defiant and the attacks on vessels have persisted. On the 25th of January, members of the Bani al-Harith tribe, supporters of the Houthis, held a rally in the north of Sana'a, showcasing their arms and announcing their readiness for a confrontation.
We say to America, Israel and Britain, you will not occupy Yemen nor Palestine. We will sink you, your battleships and your ships in the sea. This Yemeni people will make a graveyard for the invaders. We are ready to confront wherever they want, on land and at sea, as we are on the lookout for them.
Given the impending eventual reduction of US forces raises questions about sustainability of US counter-Islamic State mission in Syria as well. Is the US's announcement its first step to avoid the risk of being pulled into a wider conflict in Iraq, Yemen and beyond? Only time will tell.
An overwhelming majority of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are descendants of refugees. And these descendants of refugees have now been turned into refugees all over again. Now, the Israel-Gaza war that has dragged on for more than 113 days now has sparked a humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip. At this moment, tens of thousands of Palestinians are being killed, and an overwhelming 70% of those are said to be young women and children. But the plight of those who are still caught in this Israeli offensive is beyond what words can describe. In the biting cold of the winter, a huge number of the displaced Palestinians who have now been rendered homeless are living in tents. The humanitarian aid that is being sent into the Gaza Strip has been described as a drop in the ocean, and starvation, chronic hunger and disease has now become the reality of Gaza. Our next poll gets more details.
This is the scale of devastation that has been wreaked on the Gaza Strip. Neighborhood after neighborhood, city after Palestinian city has been reduced to a desolation. The Palestinians who have been uprooted from their homes say these neighborhoods, not so long ago, were once full of people teeming with life. But now, almost every home in the Gaza Strip has been scarred by war. "70% of all Gaza's 439,000 homes have been bombed and destroyed. And an overwhelming majority of the Palestinians in Gaza, who have nothing to do with Hamas, have been driven out of their homes and have been turned into refugees seeking safety. The United Nations has described the conditions in the Gaza Strip at the moment as uninhabitable. In the biting cold of the winter and rain, a huge number of Palestinians are now living in makeshift tents with no protection against the forces of nature. The aid that is trickling into the Gaza Strip has been described as a drop in the ocean. Chronic hunger and starvation is the reality of the new tent habitations in Gaza. At the community kitchens that have been set up, young Palestinian children line up for hours. There are long queues in which people have to wait to get access to drinking water. The bitter cold and lack of proper nutrition has meant that more and more people, especially children, are falling ill. and the few partially functioning hospitals are short of medicines.
There is no treatment. The doctor writes a prescription in the hospital. There is no treatment. We went to the pharmacy and there was no treatment. We went to UNRWS center and there was no treatment. This kid needs a nebulizer. They do not have one. My son needs antibiotics for the allergy in his lungs, but there are none. My daughter has been sick for a week and there is no treatment. We give them syrup, but it is useless. Children will suffer until they die. Our life is a slow death. Children are dying slowly. If there is no treatment, this is a slow death.
At this moment, there is no safe space in Gaza. Israel has continued with its offensive, even in places where it had directed the Palestinians to flee for safety. Musa al-Alul was with his family at the Maghazi refugee camp when his neighborhood was struck in an Israeli airstrike.
We were sitting safely at our homes and nothing was going on. Suddenly, we heard a sound of a hit and we saw the smoke. So we started running. So we came here, as you can see, to help people, to let them out and to put out the fire. And as you can see, it's a house. Look at the other house. We still don't know the number of people who are wounded or dead. The situation is extremely tragic. And what is going on has to end and not stay like this. I can't say more. You can see the damage. We are looking as if we're digging in the ground. And I don't know what to say. There is nothing and nobody here.
I think the WHO chief, while describing the situation in the Gaza Strip, broke down, saying that war has never been the solution for any problem ever.
If we look for a solution, it's always possible. It's only the will that's required. And I'm a true believer, because of my own experience, that war doesn't bring solution, except more war, more hatred, more agony, more destruction. So let's choose peace and resolve this issue politically. I think all of you have said the two-state solution and so on, and hope this war will end and move into a true solution. Struggling to speak because the situation is beyond words.
Central Nigeria is an ethnically and a religiously diverse hinterland that is known as the Middle Belt, where the vicious cycle of violence has claimed hundreds of lives in recent years. In the latest instance of violence, at least about 43 people were killed in 2 days of clashes in Nigeria's Central Plateau state. A row over cattle sparked violence in the state that's fraught with ethnic and religious tensions. As a preventive measure, soldiers were deployed, but reportedly, they stayed on the main roads and did not intervene in the violence in the suburbs. A 24-hour curfew was imposed by the state government, but it proved ineffective in curbing the violence. And also in similar instances of violence in another part of the Plateau state, more than 100 people were killed on the occasion of Christmas when violence broke out between the cattle herders and farmers in Nigeria. Our next report gets you more details.
Nigeria's Plateau state is where the mainly Muslim north meets the largely Christian south. Many communities are mixed here. The town of Mangu, 74 kilometers southeast of the state capital, Jos, is inhabited by residents mainly from the Muslim Fulani and Christian Wagaful ethnic groups. The latest violence between the communities erupted on Tuesday afternoon when cattle belonging to Fulani residents escaped onto a road, angering the Wagaful community. A dusk to dawn curfew was imposed but failed to stop violence the next day. What ensued was tit-for-tat attacks in which 7 mosques and 4 churches were destroyed.
Yesterday now, when we were in the hospital, we heard voices in the morning. They came out to burn one church opposite the hospital. They were able to set fire, but people came out and extinguished the fire. They came back again and extinguished the fire. Then they came back again the third time, but they are not able to succeed.
The scale of violence can be gauged by the fact that in one area alone of the Mangu town, where both ethnic groups reside, about 100 houses have been burnt down. Police appealed to the residents to obey the curfew and restore peace.
We just want to use this opportunity to urge the good people of Mangu local government to please obey the curfew. I think before today we were not having this, but trying to enforce it, I think we have done a good job for today, and we'll continue to do that and to ensure that peace is restored, calm is restored, and Plateau State will be better for it.
Here's hoping this latest cycle of violence in the communal conflict-plagued central Nigeria comes to an end soon.
The Caribbean nation of Haiti is in danger and needs urgent attention. The security situation in Haiti today has plummeted to such an extent that it is comparable to a nation at war. The United Nations estimates that since the assassination of the former President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021, emboldened gangs have seized control of nearly about 80% of the Haitian capital. The word on the street, though, is that not all of Port-au-Prince is veritably controlled by gangs. At this moment, a staggering 200 gangs operate with impunity in the Port-au-Prince metropolitan area. Killings, kidnappings, loot and rape have sowed terror in communities that are already suffering from endemic violence. Now, the violence has been escalating for several months now, with the armed gangs jockeying for power and are seeking to put more pressure on the interim Prime Minister Ariel Henry before the 7th of February deadline of a political accord that had consolidated his power. Our next report gets you more details.
Haiti is the poorest nation in the Americas. The security situation here has nosedived since the assassination of former President Jovenel Moïse in July 2021. A nation of nearly 12 million people has been taken hostage by an estimated 7 major gang coalitions. Violent crimes such as kidnappings for ransom, armed robbery and carjackings are disturbingly common. Killings and rape have been used as brutal tactics to sow terror in communities. Now, in the latest flare-up that could prove to be a turning point for the gangs, the Solino neighborhood at Port-au-Prince witnessed deadly days-long clashes, which intensified on the 18th of January, forcing residents to flee. Thick columns of smoke rose above the once peaceful neighborhood, and the pop of automatic weapons echoed throughout the day. Frantic, desperate residents kept calling radio stations asking for help. With no help arriving, they resorted to erecting barricades to defend themselves from the attack on Solino.
We're asking the entire metropolitan area to stand up. The entire republic must rise to make Ariel Henry respond. We can no longer resist insecurity by gangs. Nothing is functional, not even the democratic institutions. We want elections free of gangs. The head of state is now even involved in gangs. The whole country is gangsterized.
Solino, which is home to thousands of people, was once infested by gangs before a United Nations peacekeeping mission drove them out in the 2000s. The fear is, if Salino falls, gangs would have easy access to neighborhoods such as Canapé Vert, which have so far remained peaceful and relatively safe. In another development further worsening the situation, 8 people, including 6 nuns, were kidnapped the next day, while traveling on a bus in Port-au-Prince. Pope Francis issued an appeal calling for the release of the kidnapped and an end to violence.
I learned with pain of the news of the kidnapping in Haiti of a group of people, among them 6 religious sisters. In earnestly asking for their release, I pray for social harmony in the country. I invite everyone to stop the violence that causes so much suffering to that dear population.
Close to 3,000 people were kidnapped in Haiti last year by the gangs. This is in addition to the approximately 4,000 people suspected to have been killed. The Haitian police force, needless to add, remains overstretched, understaffed, and under-resourced. What has been the response of the international community in the spiraling security crisis? United Nations Security Council last October approved deployment of a foreign armed force led by Kenya to help quell the rampant gang violence.
Mission's ability to support the Haitian National Police.
But an impoverished, exasperated, and increasingly desperate Haitian population is still awaiting the development.
And with that's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback, or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.